All right. So, you guys, we are back to reading Harbor Me by Jacqueline Woodson, right? It's a story that we have been reading for quite a while now, maybe a month, about six kids that are all together in a room, the art room, a room to talk. And they are sharing their life with each other. Now, these kids are your age, right? 10, 11, 12 years old. They're fifth and sixth graders. And so the things that they go through, I think, are things that either, if we haven't actually gone through them ourselves, they are things that we would go through, or maybe we've gone through something similar to it, or we know of somebody that has experienced something like that. We're also doing our readers' responses, either with this story or I am modeling how to do that here. One of the things is that yesterday we did how the setting impacts the story. What are the characters able to do because of the setting they are in? So yesterday's story took place in the art room, which was different than the day before. The day before they were in the cafeteria. And because they were in the art room, one of the characters, Thiago, who is very quiet, was able to tell his story. And his story had a lot to do about why he's quiet. And that is the fear that comes from speaking another language in a country where some people have this perceived idea that, and I like close my eyes when I say that because like it's so ridiculous to me, but that's also because I'm, an English language learner as well. So this idea that like speak American, right? Like English is like the American language, and it's just not, right? America is comprised of immigrants, and so we speak 100,000 different languages in this country. But Thiago, who is from Puerto Rico, which is part of the United States of America, his family primarily speaks Spanish, and he had an experience where somebody told him that they're in America, that they should speak English, and he talked about watching his mom get smaller and smaller about that. Now, physically, she's not, but emotionally, she's getting smaller. I can remember every single one of those details because I had to think about how the setting impacts the stories and what are characters able to do because of the setting they're in before I started reading it. Because I looked at what my reader's response prompt was beforehand, I am able to retell you exactly what happened in this book. I don't know that I would be able to do that as well if I wasn't thinking about that prompt first. Okay. Today we have a different prompt. It also has to do with setting. And I hope that yesterday's prompt helps us think about the fact that setting has a lot of impact on the story and on the characters. Okay. So today's prompt is, does the setting of the story remind you of anywhere you have been? Use examples from your life and the book. So we are going to be making connections, right? Our life, the story, where do they come together? We're making these connections about the setting. Let's see what that looks like as we read along, okay? All right, as always, I am requesting, please, that you are listening to the story as it's being read, but you're not doing your own dear time. You will have your own dear time very soon, okay? So please, we're not doing dear. We're not writing our essays right now. We're not doing Lexia, okay? We're just focusing on this story. And I might even read 2 chapters because the first chapter is 2 pages long. All right, here we go. I'm going to read till 10:45. Let's see how far we get. Chapter 29. Just going to make sure nobody... Okay, here we go. The next week, just as we were getting ready to do math problems, Esteban walked back into our classroom. Miss Laverne didn't even try to keep us from jumping out of our seats to hug him and slap his back and say, "Where were you?" And "We were so scared you left forever." And "Is your dad home?" "He's still gone in Florida," Esteban said when we'd finally calmed down, "but he sent me another poem." Amari had his arm over Esteban's shoulder, and Tiago was standing as close to him as he could. The rest of us had gone back to our seats, but we were all staring at E in wonder. It felt magical to have him back. It felt like we were almost perfect again. Miss Laverne asked him to come up to the front of the class to read the poem to us, and when Amari finally let go of his poem, it's like when you put words into it, right? You got to stop, go back, because that didn't make any sense. Why would he let go of his poem? Okay. Miss Laverne asked us to come up to the front of the class asked him to come up to the front of the class to read the poem to us. And when Amari finally let go of him, he carefully removed a piece of yellow paper from between his notebook pages. His uniform was clean but wrinkled, and the dark circles under his eyes looked like they covered most of his face now. He looked skinnier, too. "We moved to live with my aunt in Queens," he said, "and one of my crazy baby cousins tried to eat this." He held up the poem. The edge had a tiny bite taken out of it. Esteban shook his head, but he was smiling. "I'm going to read it in Spanish first," Esteban said. And he read, and even though I didn't understand the words, they were so beautiful that they sounded like music. And I put my head down on my desk to listen better. "Now I'm going to read the English translation that I made for you." He looked at the five of us, then at Miss Laverne. He seemed older somehow, like he had gone away and lived a whole life and then came back to us. "And in the night, when the dog barks at shadows, tell him not to be afraid of what he cannot see or the things he does not yet understand. There is mystery everywhere. Beneath rocks, there is damp earth and an army of ants planning a revolution." Esteban stood at the front of the room, staring at the page. Then he lifted his head and looked at us. We cheered again, even louder this time. I don't know if any of us really understood his dad's poem, but for a long time after he'd finished reading, I thought about that army of ants and how they were coming together, like us. Chapter 30. "And in the night, when the dog barks at shadows, tell him not to be afraid." In the cafeteria that day, Esteban asked if he could record the poems he had read to us. "I don't know if I'm going to be here tomorrow," he said, "or the next day or the day after that. But I thought you were back, son," Amari said. Esteban looked down at his empty tray. He had eaten everything on it so fast. Amari handed over his milk and I gave him my leftover beef taco. "We don't know what's going to happen," he told us later when we got to the art room. "They might be trying to deport my mommy too. And that's why we moved to my aunt's house. It's like my mommy has to hide now." "But why?" Ashton asked. Esteban shrugged. "She's from the DR too." That's the Dominican Republic. "My aunt was born here, and her husband is from America. My mommy said if she gets sent back, me and my sister can stay with my aunt. But I don't want that." He climbed up to his place by the window, but he didn't get quiet and stare out. He turned towards us, crossed his legs, and when he did, I saw the holes in the bottoms of his shoes. His socks, which were probably bright white when they were new, were grayish and barely covered his ankles. His uniform pants were too short now. I turned on the recorder and put it on my desk. Esteban nodded, repeated what he had just said, and continued. They took my papi. They came to his job when he was leaving, and they said he didn't belong in this country. Maybe always in his heart he knew the day was coming. When I was little, he used to always say to me, every day is a blessing from God, Esteban. Even if it rains or gets so cold you can see your breath and think your own bones are going to break beneath your skin, this too is God's blessing, my papi said. One day, your days are all gone, and then that's when you have nothing. I was probably a stupid little kid whining because I wanted a toy or ice cream. I don't even remember. But now I know something. I know we had everything we needed. We had food every day and coats and boots and warm socks and water. Before, you used to hear the word immigration, and it sounded like everything you ever believed in. It sounded like Feliz Cumpleaños and Merry Christmas and Welcome Home. But now if you hear it, and you get scared because it sounds like a word that makes you want to disappear, it sounds like someone getting stolen away from you. What's going to happen, E? Amari asked. Esteban shrugged. My mommy says you have to pay for lawyers and stuff to fight it, but we don't have money for that. I think we're all going to have to go back to the DR. And that would suck, because I would miss New York and I would miss all of you guys. We sat there, silent, all of us looking at Esteban. It felt like he was already gone. And we were trying hard to remember him. Now that's the end of chapter 31. Okay. We're talking about setting, right? I made a couple of connections in that first chapter. It made me actually stop and think when they were talking about like the baby cousin eating the paper, right? I had this like instant picture in my head that popped up of like Lillian, like who's just, when she was just a little baby, she still eats paper, but where she'll like grab something and shove it in her mouth and like run away, right? And you're trying to get it because if it's something important. And so like I instantly made a connection to that moment. And in my head, I kind of stopped reading because I started thinking about that instead of what I was reading. So that was kind of fun. But now connections are important, and those are good to stop and jot. Okay, because that's going to help me with my retell of the story later. But that wasn't like the main purpose of the essay. So that connection is great, but it's not going to give me a whole lot of information about what was happening in these two chapters. Can anyone, let's go ahead and look again at what our reader's response was, what we were supposed to be thinking about. So we're supposed to be thinking about, does the setting of the story remind you of anywhere you have been? And use examples from your life and the book. So let's start. Where did this take place? Whoops. What is the setting of this story? Okay. It happens at school, right? So can anybody make a connection to something in this story, in these chapters, and school and your life? Okay, Mila. That's okay, Jay.
Once one of my friends was gone for a while, but then they came back and we were surprised. just like a step on came back.
Awesome. What an awesome connection, right? So you've once had a friend that didn't come back to school and they were gone for a really long time. And when they came back, you were all surprised. Were you also excited? Milla's saying, yeah. That is a great connection, right? And that happens in the setting of school. If it was summertime and you were all on summer break and your friend stopped showing up, would you know it? You wouldn't know that would happen because the setting has changed. But because of school is happening, right? When Esteban comes back, it's an important moment. Another thing too, right, is having this connection with each other. These friends are getting really tight, right? Like they are good friends. And they have a connection as to what happens in the art room. I can make a connection because I have had classes before. Like when you guys get into older grades, like middle school and high school, and you switch room to room, right? And like, so I had a class one time, it was called Write Design. And all we did was we did creative writing and graphic art. Those of us in that class were in that class because art and writing were very important to us. Everybody. So we had that connection. And we would share and talk about things in that classroom that we wouldn't share or talk about in, say, the history class or in our PE class, right? What we did in art class was this like connection that we made with each other. And that was something that I made a connection with in this story when they're talking about how in the art room they're all together and they talk about specific things. I have been in a school where there's a special room different than this, but still a connection. Okay? So we're not all going to make super deep connections. Your connection could just be like, I've had friends at school. It's still a connection to the setting, right? Or in the cafeteria. I've hung out with my friends in the cafeteria and talked about things. Okay. Great job listening. All right. Next, it's your turn. So it's going to be your turn to open up your books. You're going to get started on your Dear time. Dear is 20 minutes of reading plus the reader's response reflection. You can make the reflection as you are reading. You don't have to spend 10 minutes doing that. Okay? It could be as you are reading. For those of you that are in my Yellow Leopards, this is also a time where you could spend 20 minutes reading and doing your reader's response and then 10 minutes on Lexia. Okay? So that would apply to Miles and Abdul and Kathy and Hez. Okay? Because you guys don't have that 30 minutes built into your day. Okay? All right. Let's get reading.